So without any further hesitation, Wren T. Brown.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I count it an honor to be here with you this morning as you prepare to have your Epicurean delights. I'm reminded of the Declaration of Sentiments from 1848, where it says, institutions long established shall not be changed for light and transient causes. But the 110-year history of the University Club is just a testament to endurance and something that's very, very important, that you keep striving and you hold on. And so I'm honored to be here with all of you, again, celebrating this 110-year history of the University Club.
First, before we talk about Wren the actor, let's talk about Wren the founder and producer of the Ebony Repertory Theater on Washington Boulevard in Los Angeles.
Thank you, Michael, very much. The Ebony Repertory Theater holds the distinction of being the first and only African-American professional theater in the history of Los Angeles. It was founded in 2007, and it's just, we house ourselves in the Nate Holden Performing Arts Center at 4718 West Washington Boulevard. And one of the things that makes me most proud is that I was born and raised 150 yards from the front door, where now I reside in cultural leadership within the city of Los Angeles. My children represent the fifth generation of my family born in Los Angeles. My great-grandmother was born in Los Angeles in 1890. Her parents married there in 1882. And so interestingly, when the University Club was founded in 1908, my great-grandmother was married that year in 1908 at 18 years old. And so the Ebony Repertory Theater brings great joy, and to return, as I said, in a role of cultural leadership in the city of Los Angeles, really navigating the same streets that nurtured my life is quite a joy.
And the Ebony Repertory Theater, it's an award, you produced award-winning pieces there, in particular Lorraine Hansberry, Raisin in the Sun, which you guys won an LA Ovation Award as well as an NAACP Award. Tell me about that production.
Well, A Raisin in the Sun, you all know that seminal work of Lorraine Hansberry. Lorraine Hansberry wrote and made its Broadway debut in 1959. It was the first black female playwright to ever have a play produced on Broadway. And it launched the career in a particular way of Sidney Poitier on stage, Diana Sands, Ruby Dee, Claudia McNeil. And so we were able to revisit that seminal work of Lorraine Hansberry's, and we had a tremendous success with it. Felicia Rashad, who won a Tony Award for Best Actress in the role of Lena Younger in A Raisin in the Sun, she came to Los Angeles to direct the production for us. And so we had a tremendous success with it, and we're very, very proud of it, and thank you for raising, the fact that we won the Ovation Award and the NAACP Theater Award.
So with the Ebony Repertory Theater, when you say the first and only black professional theater, perhaps some folks that aren't familiar with theater, can you explain what that really means?
Well, when I say professional, I don't mean that the ushers and the security guards offer nice courtesies to people as they walk through the door. Meaning that we pay our actors and our designers a living wage. We pay a pension and health contribution. So it's not something that when you come to the time of your retirement, you can look back and say that, oh, in 1989 or 2017, I worked at the Ebony Repertory Theater, because it will be there as a part of your retirement reality. And that's very important to me, because I've been a professional actor for 36 years now. I've gotten my SAG card on March 17th, 1982, as a senior in high school at Hamilton High School in Los Angeles. And looking up now, when you talk about health insurance, caring for yourself, having your spouse join to your health insurance, then your children, you can only achieve that by working under professional contracts and having contributions made to your eventual retirement. And so I could not endeavor to come into the theater and not have that professional reality for the actors and the other artists we would hire. So that's the distinction.
How much so you were on the board of directors of the Screen Actors Guild?
Yes, for 5 years.
How much did that inform perhaps structuring the theater in that way?
Well, it informed my life in a very specific way. My grandfather, my mother's father, was my living hero. He's singularly the greatest human being I've ever met in my life. My grandfather used to have a phrase. He was an artist, and perhaps we'll talk about him. But my grandfather used to say to me as a child, son, amateurs get trophies and pros get paid. Amateurs get trophies and pros get paid. And in 1996, I was called with a young 14-year-old Jessica Alba to do the remake of the Flipper series from the 60s. It was a remake, and we went to Australia on the Gold Coast, and we shot the show for a year. And by the 8th episode, I started looking at my checks, and I saw the check stub said non-union. Now, Village Roadshow, one of the largest producers of film and television in the world, you know, they were producing our show. I certainly signed a SAG contract, but it said non-union. And so we got together with the other principal actors on the show, and we said, listen, by episode 11, which was 50% of the order, we're gonna have to have them retroactively have us under a collective bargaining agreement, because this is too much money that will be missed as a contribution toward our pension and health and our retirement. And so the late Jim Terry, who was in contracts at the Screen Actors Guild, from Australia, I made 31 phone calls to him. And he joined with us, and retroactively, Village Roadshow signed the collective bargaining agreement to ensure that all 22 episodes were under that agreement and contributed to our future. And so that became the strong impetus for me to want to get on the board of the Screen Actors Guild. In fact, the then president, Richard Masser, recruited me because I had fought that fight on behalf of the entire company of Flipper. So the Screen Actors Guild and that disposition of our show there at Flipper was the profound impetus for my being on the board for 5 years.
Wow, beautiful. And since you mentioned some of your grandfather, you actually come from a long lineage of performers.
Yes.
You gonna outline some of that lineage?
Absolutely, I'm greatly honored to do that. My great-grandfather, Willis Handy Young, was born in 1872, and at the turn of the 20th century, he had a group called the New Orleans Strutters, and they were a minstrel group, and it was made up of his children, and those children, his eldest son was the great tenor saxophonist, my great-uncle Lester Young. He named Billie Holiday Lady Day, and he was the seminal tenor saxophonist in the breakout years of the Count Basie Orchestra. Then he had a daughter, my Aunt Irma Young, and she was a wonderful dancer and saxophonist as well. And then my beloved grandfather was born, Lee Young, Sr. And my grandfather, for 25 years, was the musical director for Nat King Cole. He was the first black staff musician in the history of Hollywood. He was on staff at Columbia Pictures in 1946. In 1936, he was the drummer for the great Ethel Waters. In 1937, he made his first recordings, and they were with Fats Waller in 1937. In fact, December of 1937. My father's father, Troy Brown Sr., from Memphis, Tennessee, was the 5th black actor in Screen Actors Guild. He was in Nothing Sacred with Carol Lombard and Frederick March. He had a 7-year contract with David O. Selznick, and both of my grandmothers were Cotton Club dancers. My father's mother was a Cotton Club dancer in New York, and my mother's mother was a Cotton Club dancer in Los Angeles. And in fact, one of the earliest photographs of my maternal grandmother's career were right here in San Diego in 1930 at 19 years old. She was dancing as a Corrine in one of the major floor shows here in San Diego. So I've always had a particular affinity for this particular city.
Okay. So with a performing trajectory like that, considering being an accountant probably wasn't probably wasn't on your list.
Well, Michael, I have to tell you, from an accountant perspective, when you have to take your shoes off to really count, that was not in my future. Doing math, it was not at all in my future. But no, it's really, I'm the 5th of 6 children, and I am the only one in the performing arts. It's a great privilege to carry the banner. My father's parents I did not know, but to come to know them through the ephemera and memorabilia that they left behind. And because you can look at a film from 1937 or 1936 or 1939, and I can see my grandfather animate a character and hear his voice, wow. It brings great joy to me to know that I stand on the shoulders not only of those other artists who have populated the theatrical vineyard, but standing on the shoulders of those who have resided in my bloodstream is a great honor. All right,
and so you're no stranger to San Diego, actually, in terms of theater. You've actually performed at the Old Globe Theater, which is right here in our backyard, is the 5th largest regional theater in the country. And tell me about the performance there at the Old Globe.
Oh, I had a great time at the Old Globe. The summer of 1993 was the first time I came down to perform at the Old Globe. We did a world premiere play called Burning Hope, and at that time it was called the Cassius Carter Theater. That's the small theater in the round. And we just had a tremendous opportunity to do this world premiere work but we were there at the Shiley Terrace. We stayed there, and we would go and have this wonderful meals at Cane's, a restaurant on University Avenue, I think it was. Just had a glorious time being there as a company member with all the other productions that were going on under the leadership of the great Jack O'Brien, and certainly the great Craig Knoll was there. So it was a tremendous time, and I'd like to say in 1993, that summer, my wife was infanticipating with our first child, who was eventually born on September 17th, 1993. And it was interesting. 1993 was a fascinating year because it was the first time I played a father in every medium of performing. And it was the first time I was to be a father. So it's so interesting that my eldest daughter was on her way, and on the stage, on the small screen, on the big screen, and in a commercial, I played a father for the first time in all of those mediums. So it's kind of fascinating, energetically, if you will.
And so, before we get off the topic of theater, could you speak to, there's something, you've done television, film, commercial, all these things. What is it about theater, as an actor, what is it about theater? What called you back to the stage as opposed to those other mediums?
The urgency of the now, as we are presenting this morning, to be able to look in these eyes and to be able to scan the room and see people and to make eye contact, there's nothing like the immediacy of that response. The coming there and getting on a stage with your character and having an opportunity. There are no cuts in the theater. There is no stopping the work. Other than if there's some sort of technical snafu, there is no stopping the work. So it calls upon a different standard of focus and concentration. And also, you know, the theater for me absolutely is about companionship and not competition. It really, really is about companionship, because the vulnerability that one must take onto the stage to get to their best work and to render oneself naked, metaphorically, is so important. And the theater, again, the urgency and the immediacy of playing right here and then hitting an audience and having that audience send that energy back to you, there's nothing like it. The other mediums have tremendous impact as well. I mean, you do a guest star, for instance. I remember doing a guest star on the television show, a top 5 show called A Different World in 1989. And so it airs that night, and the next morning you happen to go to the mall, and 33, 40-odd people walk up to you. So there's that difference as well. But for me, the food for the soul, in absolute terms, is the theater.
Going to film and television, I just wanted to read off, and this is just a fraction of what you've done. You were in Waiting to Exhale. How many of you remember Hollywood Shuffle?
My first film.
His very first film was Hollywood Shuffle with
Robert Townsend. Keenan Ivory Wayans.
Yes. There's Under Siege 2, Dark Territory, The Dinner, Heart and Souls with Robert Downey Jr.
That's right.
The West Wing for television, Frasier, Star Trek Voyager, as we saw here, Seinfeld, Whoopi Goldberg's TV show, Grey's Anatomy had a recurring role, and as of late, you were on Transparent. It was an Amazon series.
Yes.
And what you have coming up next is Orville on Fox TV. Tell us about what we should expect to see.
The Orville is created from the genius mind of Seth MacFarlane. It will be season 2 beginning December 30th. I was welcomed to that company to do a wonderful role that I'm hopeful will become recurring. The experience was wonderful. Seth MacFarlane could not have been more generous. And it's not often that you have someone in absolute leadership of something where they're generous to a person who comes through for 8 or 10 days to be a guest star in our industry. But to work with that entire company in this science fiction parody, a kind of parody takeoff of the Star Trek Enterprise series and other things of that nature, it was a joy to do that. So I'm looking forward to it. I haven't yet seen the work, and so hopefully I think it will be airing perhaps in January. The season begins December 30th, but I'll look forward to that work as well.
You are definitely greatness, and you've performed in film and television with some of the greats. Is there any particular, like a couple of actors that are quite names that kind of left an impression on you or perhaps influenced you in any significant way?
Whoopi Goldberg. I have never met an artist who could in fact be tremendously selfish, be more generous than Whoopi Goldberg. She is about equity, fair play, and justice. If you were working on the crew versus being a principal actor, she wanted to mandate that the catering was the same for everyone. You're not going to go get the cheaper catering for the crew people, and you're going to go to some lofty establishment and get that for the actors. She made sure that everyone ate the same thing. She did not want the guest star actors to navigate the trains of New York City to get to work. She made sure within the budget a town car was sent so they could ride through the streets of New York in comfort to come to work to do their best work. That's very, very rare. And she could not have been more generous in those instances that I've just articulated. But there were other ways that she was that way as well. And so I always celebrate her in the highest because that was extraordinarily rare in my experience.
And so as we saw there, you were the voice of Virgil on The Simpsons.
Yes.
And so this is just added to the portfolio of things that you do: film, television, theater, commercials, and voiceover. Tell us about how that works. What is that about this voiceover?
Michael, two quick, distinct stories, and I'll start with the Simpsons story, if I may. Many years ago, I did an evening of some theatricality at the Skirball Center there in Los Angeles, at the Skirball Cultural Arts Center. And in that instance, I was the voice of God, backstage, announcing people on and doing all the things that the VOG does. Well, 12, 13 years later, there was a breakdown created with "This goes to all of the agents," this breakdown service, and it said, "Looking for an actor named Wren." Okay, so a friend, an agent, called me and said, "Wren, one of the producers of The Simpsons is looking for you and hasn't seen you in over a decade." And so I got to 20th Century Fox, and the producer said to me, "I was in the audience at the Skirball, and your voice all night is the voice of God." I said, "I have to find a role for him on The Simpsons." And lo, those dozen years later, the producer wrote the role and the writing staff wrote the role of Virgil Simpson. And I was hired, born of something that I had done 12 years earlier, and not even aware that it would ever connect itself to a job as prestigious as The Simpsons. And so that's kind of an interesting insight into how the industry can work. But that was one of them. My voiceover agent that I got that has carried me from 1989 to the present is the William Morris Agency. And I met the agent at the time. It was a woman named Nina Nishenholtz. And Nina, we were at Berkeley, the Berkeley Jazz Festival on the campus of UC Berkeley. And a friend of mine was trying to be delayed and not get inside to hear the downbeat of the first performing artist. And I just turned to that friend in a crowd of people and I said, "Come on, we need to be on time." And she said, "Oh my God, that voice. I'm an agent at William Morris. You need to call me. You need to call me when you get home." And so I've been with them from 1989 because of that voice. And so, but the voiceover industry is another part of how you not only can get in there and really learn how to work and use the vocal instrument, the intimacy of a microphone, all of the things that you can do, whether it's selling products or playing a definitive character within the framework of a work. It is another part. It's not only a cottage industry, it's a huge industry. You know, not everyone is able to make inroads into it, but I've had some great fortune in long-form narration and certainly the time on The Simpsons, but I love the world of voiceover.
So over 3 decades of working as an actor successfully and consistently, steadily, what do you attribute to this kind of success? I mean, you have 3 children, and I mean, you've raised a family on this profession. What do you attribute that to?
Firstly, thank you, Michael. There is a scripture, the race is not given to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, but to he or she who endures to the end. You have to move into a professional disposition with a willingness to run the marathon. You can only get to 36 years if you really understood at some point early on that it was about running to the end, not running a sprint of the 100-yard dash or 200-meter dash, seeking celebrity in some quick way, but running the race until the end. And the journey of the work finally it brings such joy. And I really feel that communicating is what I was called to do. I remember at 5 years old, I felt I had a calling on my life to be a communicator. I didn't know if it would be ministerial or broadcast journalistic or as an actor, but I knew that something was tugging on me to be a communicator. And so finding the road of acting, I vowed at 17 years old that I would give myself completely to the journey, and it has served me so beautifully, and I'm very, very thankful to have run this race, to be able to raise these 3 children. My wife is one of the finest lawyers in the city of Los Angeles, and she has been so supportive, and has been so supportive not only in her own work, but really, really understanding what it means to take the peripatetic journey of a traveler. We're travelers, and so that's how it's been done, with an intentionality and with purpose.
There you go. And so to build on that, I mean, you're in Hollywood. And this Hollywood is what Hollywood is, but you've been able to maintain a 27-year marriage in Hollywood. How do you go about doing that, brother? in the middle of, there's very few Hollywood couples that have accomplished something like that.
Well, again, one of the great privileges of life is to be ensconced in family. Family is everything. I tell people all the time, the young men and women I've had an occasion to mentor, when they're coming through their careers, I always say to them, put a premium on life. All the other things will come together, but value life. And what does that mean? That means that we all have to be connected to someone at some level. And it has just been a great joy. And following, again, the purpose being clear. There's nothing in life that's more important to me than family. We can achieve celebrity, we can achieve stardom, but at the end of the day, the joy of having children born, the joy of relating through the good times and the bad times with a spouse has been the richest experience of my life. And so the purpose has always been clear for me. When I wed on October 12th, 1991 at noon, I vowed to honor my vows the rest of my days. And so.
That's beautiful. That's why I love you, brother. And so a lot of young up-and-coming actors tune into Theater Corner, and I would love for you to speak to those young actors. What golden nugget can you impart to those actors watching, young actors?
Be interested in doing the work. Don't rush to desire stardom or celebrity. Do the work. The work will bring the spoils. Do the work. Stay focused on the prize, not the prizes. Stay focused on the prize, not the prizes. Do the work. It will bring joy. And that's what I would encourage. There's a wonderful statement. I remember the great Lord Chesterfield said this in a letter to his son who had been born out of wedlock. He said that polished brass would pass upon more people than rough gold. Polished brass would pass upon more people than rough gold. And so be interested in being that polished brass. Be able to go anywhere, be able to access anything, and allow yourself to be vulnerable, young people. Vulnerable not from a perspective of weakness, but vulnerable from a perspective of accessibility. That people can access you, that you can then hide inside the work because you've opened yourself up from a disposition of being vulnerable, and then things can come through you and touch others. So that's what I would encourage.
Thank you, Wren, so much for coming to Theater Corner, sitting down with a brother.
Michael, I'm honored. I'm so honored, if I may, in closing, say thank you to you. Thank you to all of you for being here this morning. It has brought me great joy to have gotten on the train to come down here and to share in this way. You've been so present in the way that you've been here today, and your questions were so invigorating. I thank all of you for welcoming me so warmly. Thank you. And thank you, viewers, for tuning into another episode of Theater Corner.
and we'll see you next time.